Hello and welcome to Thursday's special interview on Viking.TV with me, Anne Diamond. Today we join guests all over the world for a very special story from history that's now been made into a captivating drama. As any historian, author or filmmaker will tell you, if you delve into history, you may well find nuggets of brilliant untold stories, but you may also discover uncomfortable truths. You can unmask both the worst and best of humanity. And that's certainly true when you dig into our even recent past, as I'm myself doing, researching things that happened in World War II. Amazing stories of unsung heroes. Well, that too is what happened when filmmakers alighted upon a dramatic story that is now a lavish 8-part miniseries, which will air on Masterpiece PBS in the US from April the 4th, I'm told. I'm not quite sure yet when viewers elsewhere in the world will be able to see it. We'll check up and tell you. It's certainly worth waiting for. I've had the privilege of a preview, which I binged on in the last 2 days, and it is sumptuous. Based on real events with some jaw-dropping behind-the-scenes truths that most of us neither knew nor suspected. The story itself is little known outside Norway, and yet in 1940 it was of world significance, given that, as one character says, Europe is on fire, and that fire threatened to spread right across the globe. It's about a king you might never have heard of, King Haakon of Norway, and his son and daughter-in-law, the Crown Prince and Princess Olav and Märtha. When the Nazis overwhelmed Norway, the royal family were given a terrible choice: stay and become Hitler's hostages, which would inevitably cost them their lives and certainly the future of Norway as a free and independent country, or flee to a safe country and try to run a government in exile and join the fight back. For those who loved their country and desperately didn't want to be seen as abandoning their subjects, it was a heartbreaking decision. Our very own Carina Hagen takes up the story in one of Viking's own videos. Look at this.
At the narrowest part of the Oslo fjord lies Oscarsborg, constructed in the 17th century and equipped with ancient cannons. Few give much thought to the old fortress. But in the spring of 1940, this tiny outpost proved pivotal when the Nazis set their sights on Norway. As the warship Blücher tried to stealthily lead an invasion flotilla past the fort, Colonel Birger Eriksen had but moments to identify whether the ship in the pre-dawn darkness was a friend or a foe, and bravely took the decision to unleash the old cannons Moses and Aaron at point-blank range. The result was devastating. Land-based torpedoes followed in a withering barrage. It was a moment that changed the course of the world. Colonel Birger Eriksen had been right. The Blücher had been the pride of the German Navy.
The Blücher blew up, exploded and sank bang in the middle of the Oslo fjord. Nobody could get past. So the whole German fleet, invasion fleet, was held up.
Delayed but not deterred, the Nazis put troops ashore eventually and pressed on toward their goal. Norway's capital, Oslo.
My uncle was British minister in Oslo, successful woman, and he was very much involved in the whole thing.
Together with King Haakon, Crown Prince Olav, his family and parliament, they fled, being just nimble enough to escape the Nazi grasp.
The Blücher was sunk in the fjord and gave them time.
As they pushed northward, the king, ever hopeful, met with the Nazis in Elverum. But when he emphatically refused to endorse their puppet government, it was time to run again. They split into small groups. The king and crown prince stayed together, while Crown Princess Märtha took Princesses Ragnhild and Astrid to her homeland, unfriendly Sweden.
And the Swedes were not very hospitable or very keen on having them, and so they left more or less immediately for America.
Early Early on, the Allies landed troops and the king sought them out. But with multiple losses and the need for soldiers on the battlefields of France, the call was made to withdraw. And the king was left to do the unthinkable. He had to leave with the Allies.
So, what did happen next? How did they flee? Where did they end up? What was life like for them in exile? And how did they fight back? That's the story of this new drama. Would you like a taster? Before we do, let me put you in the picture. One of the extraordinary and eyebrow-raising elements in this little-known story is that the Crown Princess, a beauty and a diplomat, managed to get to America without her husband. He got to London. She struck up a very close relationship, and some would say a rather inappropriate one, with the US President, Franklin Roosevelt. There were rumours, there were stories in the newspapers, but we know little else. However, it did prove a very tasty morsel for the screenwriters to chew on. There were hints that the president was indeed a ladies' man. So here in this clip you're going to see now, we see the Crown Prince and Princess visiting Roosevelt a year before war broke out. And you certainly feel a sense of sexual chemistry in the air. Before we see the clip, let me just tell you that Viking is a very proud sponsor of Masterpiece. Atlantic Crossing airs on Masterpiece on PBS and is available on PBS Passport. So let us meet some stars of Atlantic Crossing. I am joined from Stockholm by Sofia Helin, who you will immediately recognise as the Crown Princess Märtha. Hello. And from Los Angeles, MacLachlan, who of course plays the President, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And writer Alexander Eik from his home in Oslo, who came up with the whole idea. So welcome to you all. Hello, it's lovely to see you. Hi.
Thank you. Hi.
First, we're all still sadly remote. I'm wondering when you all last met. Who wants to take this first? What were you last doing and when did you last meet? Sofia.
Yeah, Kyle, you and I met in Prague when we were shooting. We haven't met ever since because of COVID also, I guess.
Yeah.
Otherwise you would... that was in... I don't remember. Was it 2019?
Fall of
in springtime.
It's easy to lose track of time at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
like
what do you remember of that, Kyle? Was that with you?
Yeah, we haven't seen each other apart from some of the Zoom calls that we've been doing to talk about the film. But I haven't seen Alex or Sofia for apart from on the screen for over a year anyway. But I think the film has been. I also lose track of time. I think we filmed during 2019, right, in Prague all together.
Yeah.
And we had a great time when we were in Prague. We spent a lot of time together offset as well, going out to wonderful dinners, and those are what I remember the most.
Oh, do you remember those days when we could get together and have dinner with each other?
Yeah.
Seems an eon ago. Alexander, how are you, and how is life in Oslo?
Well, I'm fine, thank you, Anne. Life in Oslo is getting better, it's getting brighter, so can't complain, but you know, it's COVID everywhere, so
absolutely
just have to deal with it. Yeah.
Yes, and luckily you have had you made a film just before this all happened, so I imagine that well, you're going to get going again soon, hopefully very soon.
Yeah, I mean, timing wise with Atlantic Crossing we were very lucky because we weren't really that hard struck by the COVID situation, so we could get it out almost as planned, just a few months delayed, but now we're airing, so we're very excited to get this to the American audiences.
Yeah, well, not just the Americans. I gather you've already sold it to something like 32 or 36 countries.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, so it's spreading out. It will be screened all over the world, actually. So it's quite exciting times for us.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And as I said, I've already binged on it, and I would recommend it to anyone. It was just beautiful. Sofia, I know that you are Swedish. You're Swedish born. Did you know very much of the story when you first saw it?
No, and that was something that got me very interested in this story, that she was a Swedish princess and she had done this amazing and an incredible journey, and I never heard of her before. So I was shocked when Alexander pitched it to me and told me about her and her life, and instantly felt this is an untold story that I really want to be a part to tell.
That's right. It's extraordinary because she was, as you say, a Swedish princess, and then she married a Norwegian crown prince, and suddenly adopted a whole new country.
Yes, but it's Sweden and Norway. We are very close, like siblings a bit. And Märtha and Olaf, they were cousins, and so they were close related before they married. And the royal houses were it was a bit of a tension between the royal houses because Norway just got free from being kind of occupied by Sweden. So, but this marriage actually unified the countries in a very beautiful way.
Yes, it was a beautiful way as well, because it was a love match, wasn't it? They truly were in love, and they loved family life, and it was very, very important to them both.
Yes, it was.
And we see that very strongly in the first episodes, and we realize then how difficult the war came for them both, because they were parted by the Atlantic, part of the reason that the title is Atlantic Crossing. She's an interesting character as well, isn't she, Sofia? Because when you first see her, she is, as you would expect, she is a princess. She is very calm. She is the perfect consort. She's the perfect mother. She's beautiful, somewhat restrained, diplomatic, intelligent. But life tests her and she becomes tougher, doesn't she?
Yeah, she has to. She's very challenged by the demands on her, because when she's in America, the exiled government in London uses her a bit like a Trojan horse, even though she is not allowed to be political because she's royal. That's not the way royals should behave. So she's in a very difficult situation, and she's forced to go out of her comfort zone and start talking in public and trying to help to free her country. So yeah, and also
Roosevelt.
Yeah, and also that she's raised in Stockholm in the castle, so she doesn't know much about being that active that she's forced to be, and that she also is blessed with this relationship with Roosevelt as a friend.
Yes,
that we
said
know.
Earlier that it was somewhat eyebrow-raising, that relationship. You didn't know anything, presumably, about that at all?
No.
No, we have
no idea.
Alexander to thank for that. We've got some lovely pictures of you, and I think to a certain extent they do show the way the character changes. At first, she's very, very composed and just beautiful and radiant, and later becomes rather more serious, I suppose. Beautiful pictures there from the series. As I said, 8 episodes long, so you watch her progress as she becomes, as you say, she's out of her comfort zone, but develops a whole new strength of character, which you see there, I guess. Kyle, what about you? Did you know anything about your character and this backstory to Roosevelt before you saw the script?
No, of course I was familiar with Roosevelt, but only in what I remember from school, which wasn't very much. I wasn't even sure how many terms he had served. That's how good history is in the United States. They don't tell you all the finer details. It was a story that I was unaware of, and when I read the script, was really drawn to. And I think you touched on it a little bit previously when you talked about the family and the connection between the people. And I think that's where the script is really at its strongest. You see the impact that the situation, World War II, and all that it brings has on the people. And I felt that was very true with the relationship between Olaf and Märtha, as well as Franklin's relationship within the White House. And you can see how he deals with this with the war situation, and how welcome a face like a Crown Princess Märtha was to him. And I think he provided him a really nice escape in the beginning, and then he gradually understood her passion and her desire to help her country, and he was able to contribute to that.
Yes, it's interesting. I mean, he had a very, very difficult position at the beginning, where he felt such sympathy for her and for her country, and for the rest of the world, of course. And we in Britain always feel it through the Winston Churchill story, but was unable to do anything for so long.
Yes.
And that was that terrible dilemma. And again, I think his character changes in the very first scene, the scene that we just saw. It's very sunny. It's before the war has broken out. You look almost blonde in those pictures. You're wearing a white suit. Everything's much more optimistic. And as your character develops through the series, you become much darker looking, grayer. You're wearing brown suits. I don't know, the whole atmosphere is much darker. And we certainly, we get to believe those sort of problems that he was facing. And he had quite a soft image as well. I mean, he was very, very fond of Märtha's children.
Yes, I think, again, he was a person who really enjoyed the family, and he didn't have that kind of family. So he was able to live vicariously, I think, in a way, and sort of fancied himself, as he said, sort of their grandpa, which is such a wonderful term, and it really explained him and his relationship with the children, always bringing them gifts, very thoughtful, and wanting them to feel comfortable and at home in the United States. Which I think joined,
as an actor, you've joined that exclusive club now of actors who played presidents, haven't you?
I guess
to all meet up somewhere and do impressions.
Yes, that's exactly what we should do. I'm waiting for our likeness to be stamped on some coins, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Is it a bit of a responsibility playing a president?
There is, of course. Yeah, there is. I think, particularly with Franklin, I think, it was really to do what he was, particularly his physicality, to do that justice. And I was blessed that working with Alex, he had great attention to detail and was very focused on that as well, getting it right. And so together, I think we came up with the reality of the man and how he existed in the wheelchair and how he was able to function. And it explained a lot of his physicality as well. He was his oration skills, Franklin Roosevelt's oration skills, as well as his physicality, came directly out of the fact that he was unable to move the lower part of his body. I mean, he was a wonderful speaker, and he was his gesticulations and the way he spoke when he was orating was really spectacular. And all of that was, I think, an effort to appear healthy and robust and larger than life. And thank goodness there were opportunities to do that.
I'm sure Sofia would agree that you managed to make the man who, as you say, can't get up. You managed to make him very, very sexy, actually.
Yeah,
Sofia.
Absolutely. It was, first of all, I want to say how interesting and fascinating it was watching Kyle coming to Prague a couple of weeks before shootings and just transforming himself into Roosevelt and to adapt all that thing with the real share and all his manners. It was very a joy for me to watch. But also it was we joked during the shootings because I got so fond on his fat suit. Do you remember that, Kyle? We laughed about that. I found it so attractive at the end. So,
really?
So he really made an impression on Märtha and a little bit on me.
Oh, so you're much more skinny than the real Roosevelt then, Kyle.
Yes, although while I was there, I did manage to put on a few pounds. I mentioned going out to dinner a lot, which we did. And I'm also a bad snacker when I'm on the set. So there were these chocolate cookies that they had there. I don't know where they came from, but oh my God. So yeah, towards the end of filming, I don't think I even really needed the fat suit. I think it was just me.
I wonder. Well, let's go to Alex because he knows. Alex, congratulations. I mean, you are the series creator and writer-director. When did you first, have you always known this story and wanted to tell it, or did you discover the story at some stage?
No, actually, this story wasn't known at all in Norway. Märtha was a very shy and private person when she lived. And I guess she lived in the shadow of her husband and the king, of course. And unfortunately, she died few years after the war, so she never got to be a queen. So she's often referred to as the lost queen, or the queen we lost. And if I had $1 for every time someone asked me how it's going with my Maud project, which was the queen before, so people didn't really have any, she was quite forgotten in Norwegian history. And then in 2011, I read this article in the newspaper about Märtha and her close relationship with Franklin D. Roosevelt. And I was struck by the scope of the story, and the fact that I've never heard about this story before, and certainly not, we were not taught this in school at all. And I was just curious to find out more, and that's how it started.
Yeah, and there was, it is true. I gather that one of Roosevelt's own sons has said, oh yes, there was definitely a relationship between them. You don't know how much, but there was definitely something. And there were rumors that were actually printed in the press, weren't there?
Yes, the press in Washington, or in the whole of America, of course, wrote very openly about the close contact between the Crown Princess and Roosevelt, and they weren't shy of, suggesting that it was a romantic relationship as well. And then we had British intelligence. They were reporting back to England that there was an affair, and certainly that the president was smitten by the Crown Princess.
Yes, and of course, unfortunately, the Crown Prince, who was in London at the time, heard from British intelligence that there might be something going on. And of course, that gives you plenty to write about when you're writing a fictionalized drama, or is it a dramatized true story? How do you get that balance between the true story that you know is absolutely fact and the bits that you have to write, you have to fictionalize?
Well, we do not label this story as based on a true story. We label it more as inspired by true events. Yes. And what that really means is that some of this actually happened, and some of it could likely have happened, and the rest of it is made up. But Atlantic Crossing is a fictionalized drama inspired by true events, no doubt. So it was a delicate balancing act, really, and it's my first historical drama. So
yes,
it was. But in the end, we do not know what happened behind closed doors, so that gives us leeway and dramatic license to speculate, or to at least try and find interesting scenes that we think could likely have happened.
Yes, and which humanize your characters, because one struck me, and I thought, I wonder if there's any truth in this, or whether it's just a beautiful fiction. But at one point, the Crown Princess, living in America, opens up her home to injured Norwegian sailors. And there's one particular young sailor with whom she clearly bonds very, very closely, and she helps him through his traumas. And at the end, she waves him goodbye to go back and serve. And I presume that was made up, but it's just a lovely moment.
It is made up, but I have to say this character is a compilation of various persons Märtha met and engaged with during the war. She did have lots of contact with Norwegian sailors and soldiers and pilots, and she was quite busy meeting these Norwegian people in exile, and giving them hope and motivation to carry on with the war. And she did very often visit Norwegian sailors and invited them to her home, even as we are showing in the series. So this character is more like many of these meetings, many of these stories that we we read about, he's the essence of that, really.
Yes,
in one
amalgamated
character.
into one character. I think he was
Exactly.
called Otto, wasn't he, or something? So to Sofia, I know, as we said at the beginning, you're Swedish, but you speak a heck of a lot of Norwegian in this. Have you always spoken Norwegian, or did you have to learn?
No, I learned Norwegian for this part. So I got a Norwegian teacher like half a year, I think, before we started shooting. And yeah, but Swedish and Norwegian is quite similar. So we understand each other, but to get the tone and the melody was the hard work.
A lot of people watching right now will know your face so well from The Bridge, for instance. Did you have to speak any Danish in that? I can't remember. Do you speak many languages?
Danish is the hardest language that I understand Danish perfectly, but the pronunciation is so hard that I can't do it. So no, I didn't speak any Danish in that series.
Well, certainly the character of Märtha couldn't be much more different. How do you like period dramas? I mean, you look so. I just think if I was an actress, I would enjoy the costume, and certainly in this, you wear some wonderful clothes. Did you enjoy that?
Yeah, of course. It's fantastic to go into a character and carry all these beautiful and glamorous clothes, but also to find the way to relate to the clothes and to see how the character relates to being that pleasant all the time. That was an interesting journey as an actress, and to feel since I'm a much freer woman in a freer time, I could get a sense of like the kind of a prison she was in, like the shape she had to stay in as this princess. That was interesting to explore. Yeah, but it wasn't, I mean, after a couple of months, it wasn't like, yay, another dress. It was, but it, of course, it was a beautiful work they did with the clothes. Absolutely.
And I must ask you, what about the wave? She had this strange wave. And there's even a statue of her doing the same wave, isn't there?
Yeah, that's true.
Did you have to be taught that wave? Because apparently that was her wave. It was one of those.
Yeah, I watched her doing that, and I tried to do it as she did it. But I've been thinking about it a lot. Is it something that would spare the hand from pain, from waving too much? Or I don't know, because it looks to us very, very funny. But by then it was many royalties waved like that. So
yes,
maybe it was fashion.
Yeah, but it was clearly something she became well known for because of the statues of her doing exactly the same wave. It's quite odd, but there you are. You had to do it. You had to be the crown princess. And Kyle, what about you, man or politician? How did you want to portray the president? At least you didn't have to learn a new language for the role, did you?
That is true. That would have been very challenging for me. I'm not very good at languages, unfortunately. And I was really impressed with Sofia. I mean, taking that on, starting 6 months out was impressive to take that on. I approached, most of what my approach was really was in the script already, and I thought that there was a tremendous amount of options, I guess, in the interpretation, and I felt like the man was, and I was interested in approaching this too, was more. I wanted him to be robust. I wanted him to be larger than life in a way. I wanted him to be, as I think he fancied himself, the center of attention, in a room. This is a man born to politics, really, and was really a politician in the good and bad sense of the word, I think. But he really knew how to operate, and he enjoyed it. I also think it was a period of time that was obviously very difficult for him, and I think he was a far-sighted person, recognizing that there was a terrible thing happening in Europe and that America was going to need to be involved. And I think he had to drag the country somewhat kicking and screaming into the war. There was an interesting fact that I didn't realize, which was that actually America didn't declare war on Germany. Germany declared war on America, and then America responded in kind. And I didn't realize that. This was, of course, after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And that's what really kind of opened the floodgates and allowed Roosevelt to commit to Europe and to help with that. And I think also in the relationship with Crown Princess Märtha, I think she was really a kindred spirit to his what he recognized as this problem, more than a problem, as a situation in Europe, and she also saw that there was an absolute need for America to get involved, and I think that they shared that. I think he was really uplifted by that. Apart from everything else, her point of view was very much in line with his, and I think helped him really to get the confidence and the belief, that he could actually change America and get them involved to help save the world.
He was unrealistic, though, wasn't he, in the pressure he put on Märtha to continue their relationship. I just sort of felt that maybe, as you said, he'd been in power so long, that he'd been president for such a long time, he thought he could always have his way. And in the end, she had to stand up to him, didn't she?
Yes. I mean, I think there was truly, and we think we spoke about a great affection between them, and they definitely had a relationship which we were, and with Alec, we all discussed it. It's like how much do we want to reveal this? What was there, the physical side of the relationship, of course, and so I think we sort of dance around that. But certainly there was a tremendous affection, I think, for each other on a number of levels, and we touch on all of those.
Oh, yes.
And you're right. He served. He actually was elected 4 times, which is unheard of. And I think since then there's not allowed any longer. But he served 3 full terms and just a very small portion of his 4th term. Again, a little bit of history that I was unaware of.
Yes, and I love the lady who plays your wife, Eleanor. She'll be very well known to audiences because she played a very big part in Frasier, didn't she? She was B.B. Glazer, his absolutely hideous agent.
Yes.
What was? And I think you must have been with her on Desperate Housewives as well once. I know that you both were involved in Desperate Housewives. I don't know if you were there at the same time.
No, we were not, but Harriet she's just lovely. She's a New York stage actress, and she brought so much to Eleanor and had such a strong point of view as well. And I think really helped establish their relationship. I think was between FDR and Eleanor was very clear, and you could see that they were at a point where they were tolerating each other in the relationship. And yet I think there was still again, affection between them, and I think they recognized they were more partners, I think, in the situation that was happening than anything else. I think there was, the physical had long since passed, but I think there was definitely an appreciation for what each other was, and as much as they were combatants, they were also, I think there was affection there as well.
Lovely bit of screenwriting that, Alex, because she speaks very often. When she speaks, it's something a little bit sarcastic, and there's this very wicked twinkle in her eye. She's pretending to be nice, but you can see through it, the twinkle in the eye. She must have been a very interesting character to write.
Absolutely, and I think Eleanor Roosevelt deserves a series of her own, really. And I agree with Kyle that Harriet was, just fantastic in that role, and gave so much credibility to Eleanor. And she's just such an intelligent actress, and that's what was needed for playing such an intelligent personality as Eleanor truly was. I regard her as half of the presidency. I mean, she was able to travel a lot more than Franklin was able to, due to his polio. And I think she very quickly grew into that role of being his stand-in when she journeyed across America on different
Yeah,
Okay.
she's one of the strongest first ladies America has ever had, I think. When you wrote the screenplay, did you have certain actors and actresses in mind, may I ask?
No, actually, when I write, I try not to do that. I try to separate between the writer, the role as a writer, and the role as a director. But and normally I will just block those thoughts when I write, because yeah, that's just how I work. But immediately when I start doing the directing part, of course I that's the first thing I would dive into. And I knew very early on that I wanted Sofia to play the part of Märtha. I'm a huge fan of The Bridge and of her work in The Bridge as Saga Norén. And that is, of course, the diametrical opposite of Märtha. So
Yes.
When I saw Sofia doing an interview on a Scandinavian TV channel and saw her in private, I just realized that she had so many of those qualities I was looking for in an actress playing Märtha, because Märtha was very empathetic, and so is Sofia. Very intelligent, very emotionally intelligent, and all of that I could find in Sofia, I believed. So I approached her very early on, a year before shooting, and I was very excited and happy, of course, when she accepted the part. And that also gave us time to really dig into the work, and for Sofia to learn Norwegian. I think that was awesome. She's underplaying it. I think it's a lot more difficult than she explained, but she did a wonderful job with it. And if you compare, you know, the sound recordings we have of Märtha with Sofia, it's almost identical to listening to the real Crown Princess. So she did a marvelous job on Märtha.
Oh, take a bow, Sofia. That is brilliant, brilliant to hear. Alex, I find the use of different languages is very interesting. Once upon a time, we made movies that were usually entirely English speaking. You know, even Nazi soldiers always spoke English. Now we've moved into a different era where more of us, the audience, are tolerant of subtitles or dubbing, but particularly of multilingual series like this one. This is in various languages. What's brought that about? What's brought about that change? Do you think it's the streaming services or something like that? We are much more tolerant of lots of different languages now.
Yes, I think you're right, Anne. I think the streaming services have paved way for that trend, and I don't. Well, it's more than a trend. I think it's a natural evolution of the media, and I also think the streaming platforms, they have contributed to opening up other markets. And of course, we have also seen a quite significant raise in quality from different countries around the world. And I mean, doing Atlantic Crossing 10, 15 years ago would have been impossible out of Scandinavia. This is one of the largest shows to come out of Scandinavia ever, and I think the quality is steadily rising, and this really opens up for the English-speaking audiences to see more quality content from different territories, and slowly but gradually we're seeing that the American market as well as the British are opening up to multilingual projects. Yeah.
There is definitely a change. And just for everybody watching who wants to now see it, yes, there are different moments where the scenes switch from something in Norway maybe to something in Sweden, to America, to Britain, and all over the place really. And it's seamless. You know, you can cope. It's different from how it used to be, which is progress, as you say. So what about those wonderful houses that you were filming in? Sofia, you mentioned that you'd been in Prague the last time you'd met. Kyle, where, for instance, were you always in America for your scenes, or did you go elsewhere?
Everything was set in Prague. All the interiors were at the studio there, and the exteriors were also there, which is quite amazing. They found the White House, I remember in particular, was a pretty spectacular find for the setting.
So your White House was in Prague?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It was a really spectacular location. The interiors were all at the Barrandov Studios, which were the old Soviet era studios. In fact, I was filming in Prague in 1992 at the same studios, and further, we had the same first AD. So same guy. When I heard the voice the first time, I was like, oh my God. 20 plus years later. Anyway. So everything was set there. It was pretty spectacular location.
Sofia, where was your favorite location to film?
I loved being in the studio in the White House because it was so beautifully made, and but we saw and visited and shot in so many castles around Czech Republic that every place we went to was like going into a museum. So I couldn't choose one location. It was just, one more beautiful than the other. So, and it was also a bit complicated to shoot indoors in those castles because it was winter time and it has to stay very cold because of all the old paintings and so on. You can't just heat it up in 1 or 2 days, then everything will be destroyed. So we had to have we had a very low temperature, and we pretended to be very comfortable, even though we didn't have many, anything on. So yeah, it was a challenge, but it was a beautiful challenge.
You wouldn't know, yes. I've got lots and lots of questions to put to you from people who know that I'm interviewing you. So let's get going on a few of those, if you don't mind. Alex, you probably know this better than anyone. Who's the King and Queen of Norway now? What sort of monarchs are they? Do they live in a splendid castle, or do they bicycle around the city? And did Märtha ever become queen? Well, you've already answered that one, haven't you?
Well, as for our king now and our queen, they certainly do not bicycle around in the city. I've never seen that. I live just 10 minutes from the castle, so I go past the castle almost daily. But it's interesting for those who will watch Atlantic Crossing that little Harold, who is 3 years old when the series starts in April 1940, he is actually today our king, and he is now 83. Yes, so he grew up and he became king, and he's married to Queen Sonia.
And so so little Harold, who we see as a tiny boy in the film, he is now the King of Norway. But interestingly, his father, who was the Crown Prince, he's Olaf. He then must have taken the crown as a widower, as did his father. So we had 2 kings in a row, King Harold, who we see at the very beginning, King Olaf. They both had to rule without their queens.
Yes, sadly so. And King Olaf never remarried after Märtha's death. Then
there is a crown prince now?
There is a crown prince now as well.
And his name is?
His name is Håkon as well.
Håkon as well. So we've come round in full circle as far as names are concerned.
But then they changed the hereditary rules for the royal family. So after Håkon, there will be a queen because his oldest child is a girl. So she will become queen one day. But that's far in the future. Yes,
that's happening in our country too. Good.
Can I add something that I find very interesting with the Norwegian royal house at that time, and as the royal house overall? It's that when the country of Norway was freed in 1905, they asked Håkon to become their king, and he said, "I won't be your king unless the people choose me." So they made an election, and the people chose him. So I find that very interesting, that it's a democratic royal family in that sense. Yes. And I don't know any other royal family that has been elected that way.
No.
No.
No, and actually, Alex, you wrote that in, didn't you? I seem to remember Olaf turning to Haakon and saying, at least you were actually elected. The people wanted you.
Yes, he was elected, as Sofia explained, and to him that was very, very important. And when the war broke out, it was King Haakon's main objective to protect the constitution and to make sure that he didn't act contrary to the constitution. So for him it was impossible to accept a peace treaty with the occupying forces, with the Nazis. So and also for the government, they decided then that we will fight for as long as we can. And actually the fighting went on for 2 months, which is, I think, the longest Germany had to fight to occupy another country. And then, of course, in the end, they lost. They were outnumbered, and they had to flee to London, where they stayed for the rest of the war.
I always think it's so interesting that, and it takes a drama like this to underline it, that the characters involved didn't know how things were going to end. I mean, the Crown Princess was there fighting for her country in America, but she had no idea whether they would win or lose the war, whether she would ever have a country to go back to. We know how it ended. They didn't, and it must have been so painful.
Yeah, I often thought about the fact that she didn't know if she would ever meet her mother and father and brother again. That must have felt terrible for her those years. Even though, I mean, she had everything when it comes to food and clothes and home, but
it's not the same. Is it?
Yeah, you know, it must have been horrible. Yeah.
And Kyle, poor Roosevelt, never got to see how the war ended.
Well, the war did end, fortunately, but sadly, when they had the meeting at Yalta with Churchill and Stalin and himself, it was both Churchill and Roosevelt had pretty much given their all, and they were not able to stand up to the power that was coming out of Russia at the time, a young and vibrant leader. And they made some deals that were necessary to make that also sort of prolonged the situation. You know, the Cold War developed shortly after that, directly from that meeting, I think. He was also, I got the sense that all these people, they died young because they gave so much at a time that was necessary, you know, and they rose to the occasion, both Märtha and FDR, because they didn't live long lives, you know, and I think it was because of the sacrifices they made during the war.
Alex, when you started first writing this up, you know, you discovered this nugget of history and these untold stories and these amazing characters who'd interacted so interestingly. When you first started writing it up, what was the reaction from people that you showed it to? Did they, first of all, did they believe it? And then could they believe that you had happened upon such a good story?
Well, as I mentioned, this story was untold. It was not... It was not very well known in Norway. I mean, historians would probably know some of it, but this was really a forgotten story and a forgotten persona in Märtha, of course. So it has been actually quite a journey to show this to the Norwegian people. Of course, we had quite some debates in Norway after the screening here. But I think that is always something that comes with doing historical drama. And of course, the closer in time you are with the story that you're telling, the more intense the debate. but I think it was to many quite a surprise to see how important Märtha really was to Norway and what she did politically in Washington. And I think many couldn't actually believe it. But of course, we spent almost 7 years doing research for this series. And that was quite a journey. It was detective's work, I would say, because there was so little written about Märtha. And that was actually the main challenge of writing the story as well, is that the few books that were written about Märtha, they were all very distanced from her. And to us, the challenge was how to get close to her, close enough to portray her in a way that makes her a human being, a person of flesh and blood.
Yes, because I was going to say next, I mean, it's all very well talking about the politics. And of course, looking back at World War II, there is so much for historians to talk about and debate. But ultimately, what you've come up with is an amazing human story. As Kyle said, it's a story of courage and sacrifice, but also of love and of the feelings. The love triangle, almost the different feelings in there. You've come up with this wonderful human story. You must be very proud to see it finally, to actually see it go out.
Proud, yeah, awesome. and very pleased and very content with having seen this whole project through. It's been, many years in the making, and of course, being so lucky to have Sofia and Kyle on board, it really adds to the work, their interpretations. I think I was so pleased with them all the way through the shooting, and it's been quite a journey. It's been a marvelous journey, I would say, and I think this story deserved coming to light, yes. And seeing it now, finding its audiences around the world. I mean, it's truly fantastic, sitting here in Oslo and knowing that, so many people will see it. So yes, I'm very pleased.
Absolutely. Now, by rights, we should all be together. And at this point, we should pour a glass of one of Kyle's wines, because one of my questions here says, hang on a minute, Kyle is a very famous wine grower, wine producer. Tell me about that.
Thank you. Yes, it would be very good. It's a little early for me this morning, but we could always start with a rosé. Be all right. Well, thank you for asking. Yes, I've been involved making my own wine since 2005. I grew up in a little town in eastern Washington, and it's a perfect area to produce wine grapes. And so I got involved in a project there of my own volition, and I now have 5 different wines. I'm not the winemaker, but I have a winemaker that I've been working with since 2008, and I have all of the production. I am the proud owner of many barrels from France, and a lot of what we call fermenters, the stainless steel fermenters. So yes, I guess I'm all in terms of making wine, and it's been very well received, and it's actually available in the UK.
Oh, brilliant. You've got some unusual names for your wines.
Pursued by Bear is the name of the flagship wine, yes, which is, for those that might remember their English history, particularly Shakespeare, it is his most well-known eccentric stage direction, written for Act 3, Scene 3 in The Winter's Tale, where he wrote "Exit pursued by a bear," yes. And the actor makes his way off stage. And then not very far after that, according to the next scene, when they come on and say, "Well, poor fellow, well, we saw the half of him that was left, so he'd met an untimely end."
Yeah, okay. It's a great label name. And it Pursued by Bear sells 5 wines, I'm told here: Twin Bear, Pursued by Bear, Baby Bear, Blushing Bear, and Bear Cub.
Yes. Yes. Once I started with bears, that was it.
Have our other 2 guests, have Alex or Sofia, tasted any of your wine yet?
I don't think so. I think
No.
I need to get to Scandinavia. I don't have distribution there. So
I think that's for the reunion. When
okay,
at some
very
point
good.
we
I
can
love that idea.
Definitely.
maybe for an awards ceremony, I would hope.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But it's been brilliant meeting you all. Thank you so much. I mean, thank you for the privilege of my being able to binge on Atlantic Crossing for the last 48 hours or so. I have thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. It is beautifully shot, beautifully done, and your starring roles in it are just to die for. So thank you very, very much for the privilege. It's been brilliant, and I hope you win award after award for it. So thank you very much for joining me from your various points across the globe, and goodbye. And as I said earlier, Viking have been a national sponsor of Masterpiece since 2011 and enjoyed a very successful partnership with them. So good luck to Atlantic Crossing. Now let's leave you with more of that amazing history as told by Viking's Karina Hagen.
At the narrowest part of the Oslo fjord lies Oscarsborg. Constructed in the 17th century and equipped with ancient cannons, few give much thought to the old fortress. But in the spring of 1940, this tiny outpost proved pivotal when the Nazis set their sights on Norway. As the warship Blücher tried to stealthily lead an invasion flotilla past the fort, Colonel Birger Eriksen had but moments to identify whether the ship in the pre-dawn darkness was a friend or a foe, and bravely took the decision to unleash the old cannons Moses and Aaron at point-blank range. The result was devastating. Land-based torpedoes followed in a withering barrage. It was a moment that changed the course of the world. Colonel Birger Eriksen had been right. The Blücher had been the pride of the German Navy.
The Blücher blew up, exploded and sank bang in the middle of the Oslo fjord. Nobody could get past. So the whole German fleet, invasion fleet, was held up.
Delayed but not deterred, the Nazis put troops ashore eventually and pressed on toward their goal. Norway's capital, Oslo.
My uncle was British minister in Oslo, successful Dormer, and he was very much involved in the whole thing.
Together with King Haakon, Crown Prince Olav, his family and parliament, they fled, being just nimble enough to escape the Nazi grasp.
The Blücher was sunk in the fjord and gave them time.
As they pushed northward, the king, ever hopeful, met with the Nazis in Elverum. But when he emphatically refused to endorse their puppet government, it was time to run again. They split into small groups. The king and crown prince stayed together, while Crown Princess Märtha took Princesses Ragnhild and Astrid to her homeland, unfriendly Sweden.
And the Swedes were not very hospitable or very keen on having them, and so they left more or less immediately for America.
Early on, the Allies landed troops, and the king sought them out. But with multiple losses and the need for soldiers on the battlefields of France, the call was made to withdraw. And the king was left to do the unthinkable. He had to leave with the Allies.
He was certainly very reluctant to leave. First time they wanted him to leave, he wouldn't. And then his government and my uncle persuaded him it was the best thing to do. It was the only thing to do, really. Otherwise, he could be taken prisoner by the Germans and used as a hostage and all sorts of things.
King Haakon grudgingly agreed to depart from Tromsø, but only after one task was complete.
The king said the crown must not leave the country, so it should be hidden. And these two old gentlemen, King Haakon and my uncle, climbed up the cliffs and found this cave and buried the crown in the cave. And there it remained for the whole war. They came back after the war and it was safe and sound.
After nearly 2 months of eluding the Nazis, the king was left to watch helplessly as Norway disappeared beyond the horizon.
The the British government sent a battleship called the Devonshire to take the king and the government. My uncle was on the ship with them, on the Devonshire with them.
For King Haakon VII, born a Danish prince, and one of the only monarchs ever to be elected by referendum, his loyalty to the people of Norway ran deep. And his reluctance to leave his country was particularly strong.
They came to England, and they stayed, first of all, at Buckingham Palace, and then the bombing of London was so intense that it was the middle of the Blitz, that the Norwegian government said they better find a safer haven. And I think probably with the help of my uncle, they chose this house here, Bowdown House. I was 9 years old, and I can remember very clearly all these great fleet of cars coming up the drive the day they all arrived. I was told to keep well out of the way, not to appear at all. So I was upstairs, but I was told next day that I could come down. I was presented to the king in the library here before lunch. All the grown-ups were having drinks before lunch there. And, I waited outside the door, having been presented to the king, and to watch them all go to lunch. And he came out, and he saw me hiding behind the door, rather. And he said, "Michael, what are you doing there?" So I said, "I just watched you all go to lunch, sir." And he said, "Well, come with me." And he picked me up in his arms and carried me into the dining room, dumped me down on the chair next to him, and talked to me all through lunch, after which I was never nervous of him again. You know, he was so nice always.
Both King Haakon and Crown Prince Olaf stayed for several years, and pieces of Norwegian heritage live on at Bowdown House, including one of Norway's most prestigious medals, the Royal Norwegian Order of St. Olaf. While most days at Bowdown were focused on the war, the Crown Prince still found time for a young Michael Dormer, who developed a long-standing friendship with Norway's future king.
King Olaf was absolutely sweet to me. He was very nice. I had a lot of toy soldiers, and he used to come and play sort of war games with me on the floor. And then after the war, of course, we went and stayed with him. He was, how can I describe him? He was immensely kind, charming, very, very, very nice indeed. And you could certainly tell he was a king.
Sadly for Crown Prince Olaf, the idyllic life of a king eluded him when Crown Princess Märtha was taken by cancer just 3 years before he ascended to the throne. He was never the same.
I once, rather impertinently I suppose, said, "Is it fun being a king?" And he said, "Well, yes, sometimes it's fun, but you have no idea how lonely I am." They stayed here until 1943, when the house was taken over by the Air Ministry, principally for planning the landings in North Africa and then eventually the D-Day. And so we all moved. My mother found a house called Follington Park, just outside Windsor, and we all moved there, the whole lot of us.
Despite the inviting surroundings, King Haakon remained a driven man, as he ran the Norwegian government in exile and most famously delivered speeches regularly to Norwegians via BBC radio, stoking the passions of his citizens as they fought for a free Norway.
Well, I mean, he really inspired the whole country to go on resisting and keep going. What was his motto? All for Norway, wasn't it?
On May 8, 1945, after a turbulent occupation, Norway was once again free. King Haakon returned on June 7th, 5 years to the day after being forced into exile. The once Danish prince was welcomed back home by his people as a true Norwegian hero. In the decades following World War II, Norway hosted the Dormers of Bowdown House as they continued their long-lasting friendship with King Håkon and eventual King Olaf. Stays that included visits to the majestic Kongsgården in Oslo, not far from Oscarshall, named after Oscar II, the last king of unified Sweden and Norway. King Oscar was also one of Michael Dormer's distant ancestors. And as it turns out, he was related to our family as well. So Michael and I are distant cousins. Stately Bowdown House continued hosting prominent figures and events over the years. For me personally, it holds many, many fond memories, including delightful Sunday lunches and dinners. It also served as an introduction to Lord and Lady Carnarvon of Highclere Castle, and was often a surprise stop for Viking's UK extensions, with Michael and Daphne capturing everyone's attention as they shared fascinating artifacts and tales of their earlier lives. Bowdown House, King Håkon, King Olaf, and Michael and Daphne Dormer are sure to be forever intertwined, and remembered fondly for their role in ensuring a free Norway.